The morning sun crept through the thin curtains of a small apartment, where a man in his early 30s sat by the window sipping cold coffee. His name was Ethan, and though life had never been kind to him, there was something about the quiet that made him grateful. The world outside was rushing, cars honking, people shouting, doors slamming, but inside the place felt peaceful. The only sound that filled the room was the soft laughter of his little boy, drawing something on the floor with broken crayons. Ethan smiled. His son was the reason he kept going. Life hadn't gone the way he imagined, but being a father gave him purpose. He worked long hours at his repair shop, fixing cars during the day and doing delivery work at night. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on the table and hope alive. That afternoon, after dropping his son off at school, Ethan checked his phone. Among the usual bills and work messages, one notification stood out. It was a message from an old school group chat he had muted years ago. He almost ignored it, but something made him open it. The message read, "Hey everyone, 10-year reunion this weekend at the Grand Hall, let's catch up." At first Ethan chuckled. It had been so long since high school. The last time he saw most of those people, he was the quiet, awkward kid who wore second-hand clothes and sat alone during lunch. He was the boy others liked to tease because he never fought back. They called him charity case or scrub, loser. Back then he pretended not to care, but those words stuck to his heart like scars that never fully healed. He scrolled through the chat. The same names appeared, the ones he remembered the most, especially those who made his life miserable. They were all excited about the reunion, sharing pictures of fancy houses, vacations, and their new cars. And then one of them, someone he recognized immediately, tagged him in a message. "Hey, even Ethan should come. Would be fun to see how life turned out for everyone." There was laughter in that emoji, a hint of mockery disguised as a joke. Ethan stared at it for a while. His chest felt tight, not from anger but from old memories resurfacing. The humiliation, the loneliness. The days when even teachers overlooked him because he wasn't one of the cool kids. He almost put the phone down, but then he looked at the picture on his wall, a photo of him and his son at the park. They were both smiling, covered in dust, but genuinely happy. That image reminded him of something important. He whispered to himself, "I'm not that same boy anymore." The next few days passed in silence. He didn't respond to the chat, and the invitation slipped to the back of his mind. Life had its routine: work, groceries, helping his son with homework, fixing broken machines, paying bills. But late at night, when his son was asleep, he'd think about the reunion. It wasn't about showing off or revenge. It was about facing a past he had buried for too long. One evening, while he was working on an old engine, his son came into the garage holding a small toy car. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to fix cars like you," the boy said proudly. Ethan smiled and wiped his greasy hands. "You can do anything you want, son," he said softly. "As long as you do it with heart." The boy tilted his head. "Then why don't you ever see your old friends? Don't you miss them?" The question hit Ethan harder than expected. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. "Sometimes," he said finally. "But some friends aren't really friends. Some people teach us how to be strong by not being kind." The boy nodded in confusion but smiled anyway. Children rarely understood the weight behind adult words. Ethan looked at him and decided, maybe it was time to face them, not to show off, not to prove them wrong, but to show himself how far he had come. On Friday, he sent a short reply in the group chat. "Count me in. See you there." The responses came quickly. Some seemed surprised, others fake friendly. "Wow, look who decided to join. Didn't think you'd show up, man. Can't wait to see you." He could almost hear the laughter behind their words. But this time he didn't feel small. He just smiled and put the phone away. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about high school, how cruel those days had been. There was one memory that never left him. It was the day of the graduation party. Everyone had dressed up nicely, and Ethan had borrowed an old suit from his uncle just so he wouldn't stand out too much. He remembered standing near the drinks table, trying to make small talk when one of the bullies tripped him, spilling soda all over his clothes. The whole room had laughed. He had smiled weakly and said nothing, walking out quietly while they continued to mock him. That was the night he promised himself he would never depend on anyone again. Now 10 years later, he was about to see those same faces again. The day of the reunion arrived. The morning was bright but calm, the kind of day that made the air feel heavier with memories. Ethan woke up early, cooked breakfast for his son, and drove him to his aunt's house. The boy hugged him tight and said, "Good luck, Dad. Don't be late for dinner." Ethan smiled. "I won't." After dropping him off, he returned home and stood in front of the mirror. He hadn't worn a suit in years. The reflection staring back wasn't the shy, scared boy from the past. His shoulders were broader, his eyes calm. He had grown into someone who knew the value of silence, effort, and kindness. As he adjusted his tie, he looked down at his hands, scarred, rough, but steady. These hands had built his life from nothing. He remembered the sleepless nights, the days when he could barely afford milk for his son, the countless times he fixed cars in the freezing cold just to make rent. Every hardship had turned into strength. When he stepped outside, his car was parked by the curb, a sleek black luxury car he had bought just a year ago. It wasn't to show off. It was a reward to himself, a reminder of how far hard work could take a person. He sat inside, took a deep breath, and started the engine. The hum of the car felt almost symbolic, like the rhythm of everything he had survived. The drive to the reunion was quiet, with the radio softly playing old songs. His thoughts drifted between the past and present. He wondered if they would still see him as that same poor boy. He wondered if he even cared anymore. When he arrived at the grand hall, he parked outside and watched as people arrived in groups, laughing loudly. They all looked polished, confident, the same energy he remembered from school. He noticed a few of his old classmates near the entrance. They were already drinking, joking, taking pictures. He saw one of them glance his way and squint as if trying to recognize him. Then he saw their eyes widen when they noticed the car. Ethan stepped out slowly. His shoes clicked against the pavement, and for a brief moment the laughter stopped. He didn't say a word. He just smiled politely and walked past them toward the entrance. Inside, the room was filled with decorations and the same familiar faces he had once avoided. Some looked genuinely happy to see him, others looked uncomfortable, and a few tried too hard to hide their surprise. A tall man approached him, the same one who used to trip him in the hallway. "Ethan, wow, man, you look different." Ethan nodded with a small smile. "Yeah, it's been a while." The man laughed awkwardly. "Didn't think you'd actually come. Guess life's treating you better than we thought, huh?" Ethan didn't react. He simply said, "Life treats everyone the way they treat it." The man blinked, unsure how to respond. Ethan moved on, greeting others, staying calm and kind. He wasn't here for revenge or attention. He was just there to close an old chapter, with peace. As the evening went on, people began whispering about his car, about how different he seemed. Some were curious, others jealous. Ethan didn't mind any of it. He spent most of the night quietly listening, smiling when someone spoke to him, never bragging or explaining more than necessary. When the event finally began and everyone gathered for speeches, Ethan looked around the room. He realized that while everyone had aged, most of them were still stuck in the same need to impress. He, on the other hand, felt lighter. By the time he stepped outside again, the night air felt cool against his face. He looked up at the stars and smiled. He wasn't the poor kid anymore. He was a father, a business owner, a man who had built his own peace. As he opened his car door, he could still hear the faint laughter from inside, but this time, it didn't hurt. It simply reminded him of how far he'd come. He turned the key, the engine roared softly, and as the headlights cut through the darkness, he whispered to himself, "Some people laugh to feel big. Others stay quiet to grow strong." Then he drove off into the night, leaving behind the ghosts of his past, ready for the next part of his life. The lights inside the hall were dim and warm, the kind that made everything look softer than it really was. Music played gently in the background while old classmates gathered around tables, laughing loudly, pretending the years hadn't changed them. Ethan stood near the side, holding a glass of water, his posture calm and polite. He didn't drink, didn't crave attention, and didn't need to prove anything. He was simply observing. For a moment he watched everyone's faces, familiar smiles, familiar arrogance. Time had added wrinkles and weight to many, but deep down they were the same people, the ones who used to sit in groups and whisper about who was wearing what, who didn't belong. He remembered those faces from the back of the classroom, the ones that turned to laugh whenever the teacher asked him to read aloud. He used to stumble over his words, his voice shaking as they giggled behind their hands. The memory stung for a second, then faded. He smiled faintly, realizing how far away that life felt now. A woman approached him holding a drink. She looked surprised when he turned to face her. "Oh my God, Ethan. I almost didn't recognize you." He smiled politely. "It's been a long time." She laughed softly. "You look different, more confident. What are you doing these days?" "Running a small business," he said simply. "Really?" she said, clearly impressed. "That's amazing. I remember you were always fixing things even back in school." He nodded. "Some things don't change," she looked around. "You know, people used to underestimate you. It's funny how life works out." Ethan could sense that she meant well, but her tone had that old pity hidden inside it, the same tone people used when they didn't quite see you as equal. He didn't take offense. Instead, he asked about her life, her work, her family. She talked for a while, happy that someone was actually listening. When she left to greet others, Ethan found an empty corner and sat quietly. The noise of laughter filled the room, but it all sounded distant to him, like an echo from a world he no longer belonged to. He was comfortable in his silence. Just then, a familiar voice called out, "Look who decided to show up." Ethan turned. A tall man in an expensive suit walked over with a glass of wine in his hand. Ryan, the same guy who had led the bullying years ago. His smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Man, you clean up nice." "I almost didn't recognize you." Ethan nodded. "Hey Ryan, good to see you." Ryan chuckled. "Still the same quiet guy, huh?" "Some things never change." Ethan smiled softly. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." Ryan laughed again, clapping him on the shoulder. You're right. So what do you do now, man? Still working at that old repair shop?" Ethan's tone stayed calm. "Still fixing cars, yeah. Just a few more of them now?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "A few more?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "I own a few garages now. Got a small team. Keeps me busy." Ryan blinked, trying to hide his surprise. "Oh, nice. Good for you, man. You really turned things around." Ethan could see through the fake enthusiasm. Ryan was measuring him, comparing, trying to decide if he still had the upper hand. It didn't matter. Ethan just smiled and nodded. The night went on. People took pictures, danced, and told old stories. Someone brought up their high school talent show, and laughter filled the room again as they recalled all the awkward moments. Ethan remembered that night too, how he was supposed to perform but backed out at the last minute because of Ryan's cruel joke backstage. It had felt like the end of the world back then. Now he could barely feel the sting of it. He sat back, watching them, realizing something important. He didn't need their approval anymore. The version of him they used to know no longer existed. Halfway through the evening, there was a small game planned. The host called out random names, asking people to share where life took them. It was meant to be fun, a way to reconnect. Ethan listened as people bragged about promotions, luxury trips, and families abroad. Some stories were true, others clearly exaggerated. Then the host smiled mischievously and said, "And now let's hear from Ethan, the quiet genius who always kept to himself. Tell us, man, what's life like after school?" For a moment, the room fell into a half-curious silence. Ethan stood slowly, feeling dozens of eyes on him. He wasn't nervous, just thoughtful. "Well," he began, "life's been a bit of a journey. After school, I worked small jobs. I didn't have much, but I had my hands and a reason to keep going. I started fixing old cars in a rented corner of a workshop. One car turned into two turned into 10. Eventually, I opened my own place. It took years, but hard work adds up." People nodded politely, waiting for more. "I'm a single dad," he added. "My son's the best thing that ever happened to me. He keeps me grounded. Everything I do now is for him." That part wasn't rehearsed, but it came from the heart. There was a moment of quiet before people started clapping lightly. It wasn't the loud, fake kind of applause. It was respectful, almost genuine. Ryan tried to make a joke. "So no wife yet? Guess you're married to your job, huh?" Ethan smiled without a hint of irritation. "You could say that, but at least it's a loyal partner." The table laughed, but not in the way Ryan intended. He forced a grin, sipping his drink. Later that night, as the party went on, Ethan stepped outside for some air. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and the sound of laughter spilled out from the hall behind him. He leaned against his car, breathing in the cool night. He didn't feel anger or pride, just peace. Inside, Ryan and a few others peeked through the glass doors, staring at the car parked out front. One of them whispered, "That's his?" "You're kidding," Ryan frowned. "Must be borrowed. No way he's driving that." But when Ethan opened the door and sat inside for a moment, they fell silent. A few minutes later, a woman from the group stepped out to join him. She had been quiet most of the night, someone who used to sit next to him in math class years ago. She smiled softly. "You look happy," she said. Ethan nodded. "I am." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about the old days?" "Sometimes," he said, "but not the way I used to. Back then I thought those days defined me. Now I see they just shaped me. There's a difference." She nodded slowly, as if the words hit something inside her. "You know," she said, "a lot of people here, they haven't really changed. You did?" Ethan didn't know how to respond. He just smiled and looked at the night sky. After she went back inside, Ryan followed. He walked up to Ethan's car again, pretending to be casual. "So, this your ride?" he asked with a grin. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. Ryan laughed, trying to act unimpressed. "Man, never thought I'd see the day. Guess the loser made it big, huh?" Ethan looked at him calmly. "I didn't make it big. I just stopped trying to prove myself to people who didn't care." Ryan froze for a second. He wanted to say something smart, but the words didn't come. Instead, he laughed awkwardly. "You always were deep, man." Ethan just nodded. "Good night, Ryan." As Ryan walked away, he glanced back once, a strange look in his eyes. Part guilt, part confusion. He didn't understand how the boy he used to mock could stand there, so calm and untouchable. Inside the hall, the reunion slowly began to fade. People danced, took photos, but Ethan knew his purpose there was done. He had faced the past without anger, and that was enough. Before leaving, he went around saying goodbye politely. Some looked at him with new respect. Others avoided eye contact as if they couldn't face their own memories. When he finally stepped outside again, the night had grown quiet. He opened his car door, took one last look at the glowing windows of the hall, and smiled faintly. He could hear a faint song playing inside, something about growing up and moving on. Driving away, the road stretched out under the streetlights, smooth and endless. He rolled down the window, feeling the wind brush against his face. His thoughts were light, almost peaceful. He thought about his son and how he'd tell him about this night. Not the details, but the lesson. That sometimes life brings us back to the places that once broke us, not to hurt us again, but to show us we've healed. As he stopped at a red light, he glanced at his reflection in the rear-view mirror. For the first time, he didn't see the boy from high school or the man others judged. He saw someone who had earned his peace one long day at a time. The light turned green. He pressed the pedal gently, the car gliding forward into the quiet night. And as the city faded behind him, he whispered under his breath, "You don't have to prove anyone wrong. You just have to live right." The night wasn't over yet. Inside the hall, laughter still echoed, though softer now. People were getting comfortable, drinks were flowing, and the air had turned a little more honest. The earlier excitement had faded into something quieter, something real. Ethan walked back inside after his moment outside. He had left the noise behind for a while, but now he felt calm, grounded. He had nothing to prove, and somehow that gave him all the confidence in the world. When he entered, some people turned to look at him. Not with mockery, not with pity, but with a mix of curiosity and quiet respect. They had noticed how Ryan, their old ringleader, had suddenly gone quiet after speaking with Ethan earlier. It was strange for them to see Ryan speechless. He was always the loudest in every room, the one who spoke over everyone. But tonight he was quieter, more cautious. Ethan didn't make a scene or draw attention. He just moved calmly through the crowd, saying polite hellos, smiling when people greeted him. It wasn't forced. It was genuine. And that sincerity made him stand out more than any expensive suit or car could. At one of the tables near the back, a few people were talking about him. They didn't notice he was close enough to hear. "I heard he owns a few car shops now," one woman said. "Yeah, and that car outside? It's his. I saw the keys in his hand," another added. "No way. He used to come to school on a bicycle. I remember that old thing." "Well, things change, don't they?" Ethan smiled quietly. He didn't feel the need to correct them or join the conversation. He had spent too many years trying to fit into places that never really welcomed him. Now he just let things be. As he reached for a drink, someone called out his name. It was Ryan again. His voice was louder than necessary, like he was trying to take back control of the room. "Hey everyone, let's have a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To old friends and to how life surprises us, huh?" The group cheered, and Ryan walked toward Ethan with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Come on, man, join in," he said. Ethan nodded slightly and lifted his glass of water. Ryan smirked. "Still not drinking, huh? Some things really never change." Ethan chuckled softly. "Guess not." Ryan laughed, then looked around as if searching for the perfect moment to turn the attention back to himself. "You know," he said loudly, "I still remember you from high school, man. Always sitting in the back of the class, quiet, never talking to anyone. Who'd have thought you'd show up here tonight in that car?" There was an awkward silence. Some people shifted in their seats, unsure if Ryan was joking or being cruel again. Ethan stayed calm. "Life has a funny way of changing things," he said lightly. "Sometimes the quiet ones just needed time." The words weren't meant to sting, but they did. Ryan's smirk faded slightly, though he forced a laugh to cover it. A woman sitting nearby looked at Ethan and said softly, "I remember how everyone used to tease you. I'm really glad to see you doing well now." Ethan nodded gently. "It's all part of life. We all grow up." Ryan clapped his hands together, trying to shake off the uncomfortable silence. All right, enough serious talk. Let's hear some real stories. What's it like being your own boss? Must be nice, huh?" Ethan shrugged. "It's hard work, to be honest. It's not about fancy cars or money. I just wanted stability for my son. I didn't have much growing up, and I didn't want him to feel that same emptiness." The word son seemed to catch everyone off guard. A few people looked surprised. "You're a single dad?" one of them asked. "Yeah," Ethan said with a small smile. "He's 8. Smart kid. He keeps me going." There was a pause before one of the classmates said quietly, "That's really nice, man. You're doing great." Ryan took a sip of his drink, pretending to be amused. "So, a single dad and a businessman. Who would have guessed?" Ethan met his eyes. "I didn't guess either. I just worked for it." The tone of his voice wasn't defensive, it was calm, steady, and that made it powerful. The room grew quieter again. People started to see something different in him now, something they hadn't seen before. Later, when dinner was served, Ethan sat at a table near the edge of the room. A few people joined him, genuinely interested in catching up. They talked about old teachers, forgotten memories, and where life had taken them. Some had children, some had moved abroad, and some admitted they still hadn't figured things out. Ethan listened more than he spoke. He had learned that listening was often the best way to understand people. And as they talked, many of them began to confess small regrets, how they had been unkind in school, how they wished they'd treated others better. One of the women said quietly, "You know, I used to laugh when people made fun of you." I didn't say anything. "I'm sorry for that." Ethan looked at her kindly. "It's all right. We were all kids. What matters is who we are now." The simplicity of his response hit her harder than any lecture could. Ryan was sitting at another table watching the scene unfold. For the first time, he looked uneasy. He had walked into the reunion expecting to relive his glory days, to show off, to laugh at the people he once thought were beneath him. But now he felt strangely small. The person everyone was drawn to wasn't the loudest in the room anymore. It was the quiet one, the one he used to mock. As the night went on, the energy in the hall shifted. The laughter was softer, the conversations deeper. People started talking about real things, failures, losses, lessons. Ethan found himself telling small stories about his journey. The nights he slept in the workshop because he couldn't afford rent. The time his son helped him fix a car and called it their magic machine. The pride of giving his first employee a raise. Every story was simple, but heartfelt. People listened, not out of politeness, but because they felt something real in his words. Ryan tried to jump in again, cracking jokes, but they fell flat. The more he tried to draw attention back to himself, the more people looked away. It was as if everyone had grown up except him. Finally, he stood and raised his glass again. "All right, one last toast before we call it a night," he said. His voice was steady but forced. "To success, to surprises." Ethan stood too, holding his glass of water again. "To learning," he said quietly, "and to remembering that everyone's story takes time." There was silence for a moment. Then the group softly echoed, "To learning." After the toast, people began to leave in small groups, laughing and hugging. Old grudges seemed lighter now, old memories softer. The past still existed, but it didn't have the same power anymore. Outside, the night was cool. The parking lot glowed under the streetlights. Ethan walked toward his car, his steps slow, thoughtful. As he reached for the door, he heard someone behind him. It was Ryan. "Hey," he said quietly. The confidence in his voice was gone. "Can we talk for a second?" Ethan turned. "Sure." Ryan looked at the ground for a moment before meeting his eyes. "I just wanted to say, I was a jerk back then. I don't know why I acted that way. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I just liked the attention. But I know I made your life miserable, and I'm sorry." Ethan didn't speak right away. He studied Ryan's face, and for the first time he didn't see the bully from his past. Just a man trying to understand himself. "It's okay," Ethan said finally. "We were kids. We all made mistakes. What matters is what we do now." Ryan nodded slowly. "I still feel bad, though." "You didn't deserve it." Ethan gave a small, genuine smile. "It's part of what made me who I am. So maybe I did." Ryan looked confused, but also moved. "You really let go of everything, didn't you?" Ethan nodded. "Holding on doesn't fix the past. Letting go builds the future." For a moment, they just stood there under the soft glow of the streetlight. Two men who had once lived on opposite sides of the same story. Then Ryan said, "You did good, man. Really good." "Thanks," Ethan said simply. "You will too. Just stop looking back so much." They shook hands and Ryan walked away quietly, his steps slower, his head lower. Ethan got into his car and started the engine. As he drove off, he saw his reflection in the window, calm, steady, at peace. He thought about how strange life was, how it could bring pain and healing in the same place. When he reached home, his son was asleep on the couch, a blanket half covering him. Ethan smiled, gently picked him up and carried him to bed. The little boy stirred and mumbled, "You went to the party, Dad?" Ethan whispered, "Yeah, it's over now." "Did they like you?" the boy asked sleepily. Ethan smiled. "I think they finally saw me." He turned off the light and stood there for a moment, watching his son breathe softly, peaceful and safe. Then he whispered to himself, "That's all that ever mattered." Outside, the world was quiet. The stars looked down like old memories, distant but gentle. Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, complete. The night felt calm outside, but inside the restaurant the air was filled with whispers and curious eyes. When Ethan entered earlier, everyone had turned to look at him, but now, after a while, the shock had softened into something else, curiosity. People who once ignored him were now waiting to hear what he would say, how he would act, or what story he might tell. Ryan, sitting at the center of the long table, kept glancing at Ethan as if trying to find something wrong with him. He didn't like how easily everyone's attention had shifted. For 10 years, he had carried the image of Ethan as that quiet, awkward boy who always sat in the last row, who wore secondhand shoes and never joined in. To see him walk in tonight, calm and confident, had shaken something inside Ryan that he didn't want to admit. The waiter came by, pouring water into glasses. Someone laughed too loudly, trying to ease the tension, but it only made things feel stranger. Ethan sat at the end of the table, relaxed, his hands folded neatly on his lap. He didn't seem like a man trying to prove a point. He seemed peaceful, like he had already made peace with the past. "So," Ryan finally said, breaking the silence. "Ethan, long time no see. What's life been like for you, man? Still fixing old cars in that small garage of yours?" A few people chuckled under their breath. Ethan noticed it but didn't react. He lifted his glass and took a small sip before speaking. "Yes," he said softly, "I still fix cars. I just have a few more garages now." The laughter stopped. Someone at the other end raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you own garages?" Ethan nodded. "Started small," he explained. "I worked for someone at first. Learned how everything worked. Then one day I decided to try on my own. It was hard at first. There were days I didn't sleep at all. But with time, things got better." There was something about the way he spoke. It wasn't bragging. It was honest. He didn't dress his words with pride. He spoke like someone who had walked through the rain and still managed to smile. A woman sitting nearby leaned forward. "So you run a business now?" "Yes," he said. "We have 3 workshops across town. I've got a good team. Some of the people who started with me still work there. We try to help local folks too, young guys who can't afford school but want to learn a skill. Someone murmured. That's amazing. Ryan's smile faded slightly. He had expected Ethan to be the same as before, timid, quiet, easy to tease. But now the man sitting in front of him was calm, grounded, and respected. To distract from the growing admiration around the table, Ryan said with forced humor, "Wow, man, you really got lucky, huh? I guess hard work does pay off sometimes." Ethan looked at him for a moment, then smiled. "Maybe. But I think luck only helps those who keep trying." The words hung in the air like something much heavier than a casual reply. It wasn't a clapback. It was truth. The group went quiet again. The waiter brought the main course, and the sound of clinking plates filled the silence. Ethan could feel a mix of emotions swirling around him. Some faces showed guilt, others curiosity, and a few even admiration. As dinner went on, a few classmates began to ask more questions, not mocking ones but genuine ones. One of them, a man named Chris, said, "I remember you used to sit alone during lunch. You always had a notebook with you. What were you writing in there?" Ethan smiled faintly, surprised that someone remembered. "That was my dream list," he said. "I used to write things I wanted to do one day. Most of it seemed impossible back then, but I just liked imagining." "Did you ever do any of those things?" another person asked. "A few," he said, glancing down with a soft laugh. "Some are still on the list. But I guess the biggest one was to have a home where my kid never felt the way I did growing up. And that one I think I've managed." The table grew quiet again. His words carried something deeper than success. It carried healing. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. He wanted to change the subject. "So where's your wife?" "You didn't bring her?" he asked with a smirk, pretending to sound casual. Ethan's smile didn't fade, though his eyes grew gentler. "It's just me and my son," he said. "We've been on our own for a while, but it's been good. He's the reason I kept pushing forward." For a moment, Ryan didn't know what to say. The others looked at Ethan with quiet respect. Some of them, parents themselves now, understood the weight behind those words. Ethan didn't talk much after that. He listened, laughed softly at other stories, and seemed genuinely interested in everyone else's lives. He didn't act like a man who came to show off. He acted like someone who had finally let go of what once hurt him. As the evening went on, one of the waiters came by with a small box. Ethan thanked him and opened it. It was a toy car his son had left in the back seat earlier that evening. He had asked the valet to keep it safe. Ethan smiled at the sight of it and kept it beside his plate. Ryan saw the toy and frowned. "You brought your kid with you?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, he's waiting outside with one of my employees. He wanted to see where I went to school, so I told him he could come for the drive." Someone smiled. "That's sweet." Ethan looked around the table and said quietly, "You know, I almost didn't come tonight. I thought maybe it wouldn't matter. But I'm glad I did. It reminded me how far life can take you when you stop trying to prove anything and just do what you love." Those words landed softly, but they sank deep. The laughter around the table had turned into thoughtful silence. Even Ryan didn't have a comeback. After dinner, as everyone stood up to take photos and say their goodbyes, a few people came to Ethan, shaking his hand or patting his shoulder. Some apologized quietly for the way they had treated him back in school. He smiled at each of them, not bitter, not cold, just kind. Ryan waited until most people had left. He lingered near the table, pretending to check his phone. Ethan noticed and walked over. "You doing all right?" he asked. Ryan looked up, half smiling. "Yeah, just thinking. You really surprised everyone tonight." Ethan shrugged lightly. "I didn't mean to surprise anyone." Ryan hesitated before saying, "You know, we gave you a hard time back then. Maybe too hard. I didn't realize what it might have done." Ethan looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "It's all right. We were all kids. I let it hurt me for a long time, but I had to move past it. Carrying that kind of pain only keeps you stuck." Ryan exhaled slowly. "Still, you didn't deserve it. You were just trying to live." Ethan smiled gently. "We all were. Just in different ways." They stood there for a moment, quiet, the air heavy with unspoken things. Then Ethan said softly, "Take care of yourself, Ryan. I mean that." Ryan nodded, unable to find the right words. Ethan walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air brushing against his face. His car was parked right outside under a streetlight. His little boy was sitting in the back seat, his head resting against the window, half asleep. When he saw his dad, he sat up and grinned sleepily. "Did they like you, Dad?" he asked. Ethan smiled as he opened the door. "I think they finally saw me," he said, helping his son buckle up. As he started the car, he glanced once more at the restaurant behind him. Through the window, he could see Ryan still standing there, staring out thoughtfully. Ethan turned the key, the quiet hum of the engine filling the night. His son yawned. "Can we get ice cream on the way home?" Ethan laughed softly. "Sure, buddy. Let's make it a treat." They drove off slowly, the lights of the restaurant fading in the rearview mirror. The city stretched before them, wide, alive, and filled with stories of people who had once been lost but found their way. Inside the car, the boy reached out and placed his small toy car on the dashboard. "It's like yours," he said proudly. Ethan smiled, his eyes soft. "Maybe one day you'll drive one too." The boy grinned, and as the car glided down the road, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. Ethan didn't need to look back. He had already left the past behind where it belonged. Sometimes the best way to silence the voices of doubt isn't to shout over them, it's to keep walking quietly, letting your life speak for you. The streets were quiet as Ethan drove through the night. Streetlights glowed softly on the road ahead, and the sound of the car engine hummed like a gentle song. His son sat beside him, half asleep, his head resting against the seat. The small toy car still sat proudly on the dashboard. Ethan glanced at him and smiled. He looked peaceful, unaware of how much that night had meant. For others, it might have been just a reunion, but for Ethan, it was a circle finally closing. 10 years of silence, pain, and hard work had led to that one evening when he could finally look back and feel no bitterness. At a red light, he looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He didn't see the boy who once hid his tears in the school restroom. He saw a man who had learned to forgive, who had built something from almost nothing, and who had found peace not through revenge, but through growth. His son stirred a little. "Dad, are you tired?" Ethan smiled. "A little, but it's a good kind of tired." The boy rubbed his eyes. "Did you have fun with your old friends?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Yes, it was different. They've changed. Or maybe I've changed. I don't know. But it was good to see them." "Did they say sorry for being mean to you before?" the boy asked, his voice innocent but direct. Ethan chuckled softly. "Some of them did. And that's enough. What did you say?" "I told them it's all in the past." The boy looked up at him. "You're really nice, Dad. I would have told them they were bad." Ethan laughed again. "That's because you're brave. But sometimes being nice takes more courage than being angry." The boy nodded slowly, trying to understand, then went quiet again, his small hand reaching out to hold his father's. Ethan squeezed it gently. They stopped at a small ice cream shop that was still open. Ethan parked the car and they both got out. The night air was cool, and the soft yellow lights from the shop made the place feel cozy. The owner, an old man with a kind smile, greeted them warmly. "Late night cravings, huh?" the man teased. Ethan smiled. "Something like that." "2 cones, please. Chocolate for him, vanilla for me." They sat on a bench outside, the boy happily licking his ice cream, his legs swinging back and forth. Ethan looked at him, feeling that quiet joy only a parent knows, the kind that doesn't shout but fills your heart completely. "Dad," the boy said suddenly, "when I grow up, I want to be like you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Like me? Why?" "Because you're strong. You fix cars, you make people happy, and you don't get mad even when someone is mean." Ethan felt his throat tighten a little. "That's sweet, buddy. But I just try my best, like everyone else." The boy looked serious. "No, you're special." Ethan looked up at the sky, letting out a soft breath. Maybe we're all special in our own ways. Some just take longer to find it. They finished their ice cream, and as they walked back to the car, Ethan saw his reflection again in the glass door. For the first time in years, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel like the boy who once avoided eye contact in hallways. He felt whole. When they reached home, the clock was past midnight. Ethan carried his son upstairs, careful not to wake him. He tucked him into bed, brushing his hair back gently. The boy mumbled something in his sleep, a small, peaceful smile on his face. Ethan stood there for a long moment, just watching him. He remembered all the nights he had come home late from work, exhausted but grateful that his son had food, warmth, and a roof over his head. Every hardship, every struggle suddenly felt worth it. He went downstairs, made himself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The night outside was still and quiet. He thought about his classmates, the laughter, the awkward silences, the apologies. He knew some of them still carried guilt, while others might just move on. But he didn't need their validation anymore. He pulled out his old wallet and took out a small folded paper. It was faded and worn. It was his dream list from school, the one he used to write in when he sat alone during lunch breaks. He unfolded it carefully. The paper read, "Own a car repair shop. Have my own home. Take care of my family. Help people like me who have no one. Be someone my kid can be proud of." He smiled. Every line was crossed out except the last one. He looked at it and whispered, "Maybe I'm getting there." The next morning, sunlight streamed into the small kitchen as Ethan made breakfast. His son came running in, his hair messy, his eyes still sleepy. "Morning, Dad," he said cheerfully. "Morning, champ. Hungry?" "Always," the boy laughed. As they ate together, the phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Ryan. Ethan hesitated for a second before opening it. It said, "Thanks for coming last night. You have no idea how much that talk meant. I realized I've been living with regrets for years. Seeing you doing so well, it gave me hope. I'm proud of you, man." Ethan read it twice, then smiled softly. He typed back, "Thank you. It's never too late to start over. Take care of yourself." He set the phone aside and looked at his son, who was happily spreading jam on toast. He didn't need to think about the past anymore. The past had already served its purpose. It had taught him resilience. Later that week, Ethan visited one of his workshops. The workers greeted him warmly. The sound of tools, engines, and laughter filled the place. A young boy, maybe around 17, was struggling to fix a tire. Ethan walked over, crouched down, and helped him tighten the bolts. The boy looked nervous. "Sir, I'm sorry." "I'm still learning," Ethan smiled. "Don't say sorry for learning. That's how I started too." He patted the boy's shoulder, stood up, and looked around. The walls had pictures of his team, a few small trophies, and a board that said, "Honest work, honest life." He had written those words himself the day he opened his first shop. In the afternoon, one of his employees walked up and said, "Boss, that man from the reunion came by earlier. Said he'll bring his car for service next week." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Ryan?" The man nodded. "Yeah, seemed nice," Ethan smiled. "Good, treat him like anyone else," the man laughed. "We always do." That night, as Ethan closed up the shop, the sun was setting behind the city skyline. He stood there for a moment, feeling the cool breeze, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and life moving forward. He realized that everything, every insult, every lonely lunch, every sleepless night had brought him here. If any of it had been different, maybe he wouldn't have learned to be strong, to be patient, to be kind even when the world wasn't. When he got home, his son was waiting with a drawing. "Look, Dad, I made this for you." Ethan looked down at the paper. It was a simple crayon drawing of a car with two people inside, a big one and a small one, driving under a bright yellow sun. Under it, the boy had written in uneven letters, "Me and Dad, the best team ever." Ethan felt his heart swell. He lifted his son into his arms and whispered, "You have no idea how proud I am of you." The boy laughed and hugged him tightly. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy." As night fell, Ethan sat outside again, looking at the stars. He thought about how strange life could be, how the people who once tried to break you end up teaching you how strong you really are. He didn't hate them anymore. He didn't need to. He had learned something bigger, that real success isn't about money, cars, or what others think. It's about peace. It's about coming home to a place where love lives, where laughter fills the walls, and where you can finally say, "I made it through." His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from one of his old teachers. "I heard you came to the reunion," it said. "I'm proud of the man you've become. You always had something special. You just needed time." Ethan smiled, set the phone down, and looked at the stars once more. "Time," he whispered, "and a little faith." The wind rustled the trees, carrying away the last bits of his past. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and listened to the sound of his son playing inside the house. It was the sound of everything he had ever worked for, and in that quiet night, beneath the same sky he used to stare at as a lonely boy, Ethan finally felt something he had chased all his life: peace. Sometimes, Life doesn't give you the applause you expect. It gives you something far better. Understanding, forgiveness, and the strength to smile at the people who once doubted you. And as Ethan sat there, he realized he didn't need to prove anything anymore. His life had already spoken louder than any words ever could. The boy ran outside laughing and jumped into his arms. Ethan caught him, spun him around, and the sound of their laughter filled the air like music. He whispered, "Let's go home, buddy." The boy grinned. "We are home, Dad," and that was all Ethan needed to hear.